Welcome. Today, we're diving into a foundational overview of crisis intervention. We're going to explore the core strategies, the theories behind them, and how they're applied in the real world.
So, here's our roadmap. We'll start by pinning down exactly what a crisis state is. Then, we'll look at it as a process that unfolds over time. After that, we'll get into the theories that shape how we help, look at a practical model for intervention, and finally, we'll wrap up by talking about the crucial role of multicultural perspectives.
All right, let's start with the absolute cornerstone of this topic. What exactly is a crisis? You see, getting this definition right is fundamental to everything else we're going to discuss.
Now here's the formal definition from James and Gilliland. I want you to pay close attention to two words here, perception and exceeds. This is so important. A crisis isn't just about the event itself, it's about how someone experiences that event, seeing it as so overwhelming that it completely surpasses their ability to handle it. This really gets to the heart of it. You know, something like a divorce or losing a job isn't automatically a crisis for everyone. The crisis happens when an individual looks at their situation and feels, I don't have what it takes to get through this. It's their unique subjective reaction that truly defines the crisis. To really understand this better, we can look at the Chinese concept of weiji. It's this fascinating idea that frames crisis as a two-sided coin. On one side, you have wei, which is the danger, the potential for really serious negative outcomes. But on the other side, you have ji, which is the opportunity. It's this moment that, if handled well, could actually lead to incredible growth and make someone even more resilient than before.
And that leads us to this powerful metaphor. A crisis is like a seed of growth and change that gets planted in the middle of turmoil. It's a beautiful way to think about it, right? That the chaos itself can become the fertile ground for new strengths and new ways of coping to emerge.
Okay, so we've defined what a crisis is. Now let's shift gears and look at it as a dynamic process. It's not a permanent state. It's something that has a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. So everyone starts from a place of equilibrium. Think of this as your baseline, your normal day-to-day, where your usual ways of coping are working just fine to handle life's regular stresses.
And then, some event happens, and suddenly you're thrown into disequilibrium. This is the crisis itself. It's a period of chaos, of feeling overwhelmed, and it seriously gets in the way of just being able to function.
Now here's the thing. You can't stay in that state of disequilibrium forever. It's just too unstable. So a third stage is necessary: adaptation. The person has to find a new way to function, and this can go one of two ways. It can be adaptive, where they grow from the experience, or it can be maladaptive, leading to longer-term problems. And this brings us to a really critical time frame. That intense, acute phase of a crisis, it typically lasts about 4 to 6 weeks. That finite window is exactly why immediate crisis intervention is so important. The whole goal is to help guide someone toward an adaptive outcome before a negative coping pattern takes root. So we know what a crisis is and how it unfolds, but that leads to the next question: why do we intervene the way we do? Let's explore the theories that give us the why behind the how. First up is basic crisis theory. This approach sees the crisis state as a temporary disruption, not a permanent illness. So the main goal is pretty straightforward: help the person get back to their normal, pre-crisis balance. This theory also brings in Lindemann's idea of grief work, which basically says that working through the pain of loss is a normal and necessary part of healing. Now, let's zoom out a bit. Systems theory tells us that a crisis never just happens to one person in a vacuum. Think about it. An individual is part of a bigger system: their family, their job, their community. An event sends ripples through that whole network. So any effective intervention has to take those interconnected relationships into account. Okay, that's the theory. But how do we actually put this into practice? Let's look at a really well-known and practical model: Gilliland's 6-step framework for crisis intervention. This model is elegantly simple. It's broken into 2 main phases. Phase 1, the first 3 steps, is all about listening. Phase 2, the last 3 steps, is all about action. You see the logic, right? You start by connecting and providing support. Only then do you move on to things like examining alternatives, which is designed to help people break out of that tunnel vision they get in a crisis and start seeing possibilities again. And I absolutely cannot stress this enough: the entire model is built on a foundation of listening. If you don't first create a real connection and truly understand what the person is going through from their point of view, any action you take later is pointless. In fact, it could even be harmful. Listening is non-negotiable. This brings us to our final, and frankly, critical piece of the puzzle:
Effective intervention isn't a one-size-fits-all formula. It has to be tailored to the individual, and that means we have to have a deep understanding of multicultural perspectives.
Now, when we talk about culture here, we can look at it in two ways. There's the universal view, which is kind of surface level. It looks at visible things like race or gender. But the more powerful approach is the focused view. This goes deeper. It looks at someone's internal map of the world, things like their locus of control, meaning, do they feel they have control over their life, or is it up to external forces? That's the level of understanding we need.
Because when we ignore those deeper differences, real barriers pop up. A simple word-for-word translation might miss huge emotional nuances. For some people, their support system isn't a therapist, it's their family or their pastor. And our typical Western step-by-step problem-solving model might just not fit with a more holistic worldview at all.
And the stakes for getting this wrong are incredibly high. We're not just talking about an intervention that doesn't work. We're talking about the potential to actively cause harm, to re-traumatize someone, to completely misdiagnose the problem, or to cause the person to pull away from the very help they desperately need.